My father was the president of Concordia Junior College in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Big important thing to be president. In those days, he had eyebrows that he would twist, and they would go up like crow's wings. I'm only beginning now to realize that his spirit is in me too, and when these grow long, they go up like crow's wings. Well, of course, since it was Canada, there was a hockey rink on the Concordia campus. And that was fun in the winter. Besides our being able to skate, I would always sit in the house, that little shack, that's what they called it, shack, with a wood stove, a pot-bellied wood stove burning. I would be keeping it warm so that the people out there who were actually freezing the rink could come in and warm up at times. I felt very important. Well, the oldest son, you know, of the president of the college. After the spring came, when things dried up, the neighborhood kids and I and Paul would play football in there. It's perfect, you know, the boarded rink around, the old barely hidden lines that were there for the hockey games. We generally played in our socks or bare feet. Adidas didn't exist, you understand. There was no Nike with wings. What we had were called Keds, and they were the most terrible thing to try to run in. So in order to prepare the ground and the rink for our football, we would take a day or two walking throughout the whole place and picking up the stones that were there and tossing them out so that nobody would step on them, hurt themselves. Well, everybody else would just toss the stone out. I generally threw it up at one of those huge light bulbs that lit the rink because I always missed. I mean, I was definitely not athletic. My brother Paul, he was the athlete in the family. He still is, though every once in a while he gets into accidents, you know, plows his bike up, stuff like that. The unathletic might live the longer, maybe. Once when I had winged a stone at one of those light bulbs, I heard, "Wally!" And I knew exactly who it was. It was my father. In those days, as now, well, not anymore, he would wear black with a clerical collar. He had said this is his uniform, to let people know what he was, the same way as a policeman wears a uniform. But then when I saw him, it looked like the angel of death. He came closer and closer to the rink, staring at me with those raven black eyebrows. He had glasses in those days with thick black plastic frames. "Wally," he said, "don't you ever let me see you doing that again." "Oh, it's okay, Dad," I said. "It's okay, I miss." "No," he said, "that light bulb costs more than you know. It is a 6,000 watt light bulb," which was an enormous number for me. "Don't you ever let me see you doing that again." Well, and then when Dad was gone, I kept throwing stones at the light bulb because I always missed. Perfect reasoning. Until the perfect stone was in my hand, and I released it, and the instant it left, I knew it was a perfect throw, my first in all the world. I stood there watching that stone go up. It came underneath the light bulb and just ding, hit it and came down with a shower of glass all the way down to the ground. "Paul," I said, "don't you tell Dad about this." The other kids around there, see, I'm the oldest of the president's children. "Don't you tell my father about this. Just be quiet," I said. And they were. Paul actually didn't tell on me that time. I don't know why. He did other times. The trouble was what happened to me in the silence. I began always to feel separate from my family, especially from my father, because he didn't know me anymore. He didn't know this most important thing that I had done. He would come in the bedrooms at night. He called us all by certain nicknames. I was called Avi, and I don't know why, but that was his tender nickname for me. He called me Avi. Those nights when he came into the bedroom and called me Avi, it just made me hurt. And precisely because it was loving, it made me hurt the more. Internal agony. Because he didn't know me. He was saying it to a shell. He was saying it to something else that wasn't me anymore. And it was as if I didn't have the right to receive the love that was in that word, Avi. I didn't. So I felt more and more alone. Finally, there came one night. Paul was on the bottom bunk. I was on the top bunk. I generally like to read at night, and so we needed the light on so that I could read. As always, Paul said, "Turn the light out, Wally." I said, "I'm reading." He said, "Turn the light out so I can sleep." I said, "I'm reading, Paul." Well, he kept it up. And one thing about my brother is, when he gets tense or nervous, he laughs. He can't help it. He laughed between his teeth. I hated that when he laughed. Even in good times, I hated that. And of course, the more I hated it, the more he laughed, which was because he couldn't help it. But in my mind, he was just increasing the offense more and more, insulting me. This time, I got out of bed. I did what I had to do. I made a knuckle of my middle finger, a hard knuckle, and I went to him and I hit him, boom, right on the bone here, to make it hurt the most. He fell back, and this time he didn't laugh. This time he started crying. And he said, "Don't you care if nobody likes you?" Oh. He hadn't told anything, but he had said exactly how I felt. And it just drenched me. Well, I think this is hell, you know. I think this is hell. Knowing the truth about oneself, that self is most unlovely, and therefore not being able to receive the love that's offered. That's hell. Profound isolation. So I determined to change things. I said to myself, I have to go and apologize. Now, the president's house was on Concordia property. There was a grove of trees, and over a long green sward was the administration building, and that was up concrete steps, and it had enormous doors. And I began to walk in that direction because my father was in his office. As I walked, my butt started to tingle. It got heavier and heavier. It was like I was dragging a caboose, and my butt was saying, "You got us into this, and I got hurt." Went up those stairs, through the door, up again, down a long dark hall, very huge, very wide, stony it was. And I found my father's door. I knew where it was. There was a very small sign beside it that said, "Reverend Dr. Walter Wangerin, President." I went to the door and I knocked. It was a knock as small as a butterfly's kick. But Dad heard it anyway. You know, I kept thinking something's going to get me out of this. But that's odd because I'm the one who not only put me into this, but chose to do what I was doing. Dad said, "Come." I opened the door and went in. Now he sat with window lights behind him. He always had his desk between him and whoever was coming to talk with him. It sort of was a grand thing. "What do you want?" he said. And I couldn't speak at first. I walked up to his desk. "What's the matter?" he said. "Dad," I said, "do you know that 6,000 watt light bulb?" And he went quiet. He knew exactly what it was and what I had done. I broke it, I said. And then I started crying with my head down like this. My butt was just having jubilee of fears. And then I heard Dad come around, and I expected it, but instead I heard his clothing as he knelt down beside me. And he put his arms around me. At first that burned, but he kept his arms around me. He said, I know. He said, I know. And all the fear and all the isolation and all that hellishness passed away into his arms, wherever. And while he was still kneeling by me, he said, well, you're going to have to pay for that bulb.